So we are going to go right to Eran Segev of the Australian Skeptics and find out what's going on with those shifty characters. So let's go ahead and bring in Eran here. I have not seen Eran for a long time, actually. So this is going to be a fun conversation. Nice chance to catch up. Do. There he is. Hey, there's the man himself. How are you?
Hello. Good.
I was just saying I haven't seen you for a long time, and I think the last time I saw you was when I was still living down in Southern California, down by the harbor, and you guys came by. Or you came by. You were in town for some business reason, I think, and stopped by. We had lunch down by the water. It was like
yes,
a little while ago. So what's going on?
Well, as you know, since then there have been changes in my skeptical life. Definitely, I've stepped down from being the president of Australian Skeptics after doing it for something like 7.5 years out of about 9. It was definitely time to do that. I think the organization needed a change, and I didn't expect to be in that role for that long.
Yeah.
I have been to the US a few times. No, actually, I'll tell you when the last time I saw you was. It was at Nexus in New York. You popped in for one night.
as I tend to do. Yes, that's right. Yeah. God, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So can we bring up a picture here? There's one interesting thing that Eran and I have in common. Can you grab 48 birthday? I think you can probably guess what this is. This is from 2016, December 29th. Apparently, we share a birthday.
We share a birthday.
He is exactly 15 years older than me.
You wish. We share a birthday.
We had Michael Mann on earlier today. Michael Mann is exactly 1 day older than me. I think that's the limit of my. Well, they say
that doesn't make you feel particularly good to know that somebody with his level of achievement is younger than me. So.
All right.
But okay, well.
Well, what is the thing there? There's a statistical answer to the question of how many people do you need to have in a room before you have two with the same birthday?
Yeah.
Have you heard that? It's a very low number. It's like 22, which is surprising.
22 is the last one. 23 exceeds 50%.
23. Okay. So we've had 25 guests on the show today, and boom, look at that. We've got two with the same birthday.
Absolutely.
Now the chances that one of them would be the same birthday as me is not the same as that. It's the chance that any two of you would have the same birthday. Anyway.
Do you know the details? Are you going to do the spreadsheet later?
I am absolutely not going to do the spreadsheet and do the details later. So anyway, with much catching up to do, you're still with the Australian Skeptics, right?
Yes, I'm on the committee. What we call here in Australia a backbencher. Member of the committee, try to do the best by Australian skepticism.
I mean, so the main thing that we can talk about today that's useful is useful for the American audience anyway, is to learn what you guys have been up to, what kinds of things will you decide to throw resources at that have some kind of a return on investment. What works and what doesn't, basically, for a skeptical organization?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an awfully broad question, but
whatever. It's also a tough one because we don't necessarily work based on we don't necessarily do a return analysis before we decide to invest in a cause. We give, for example, we've been giving prizes for a very long time to through science teachers associations. To students who do very well in science. This is not something that directly promotes skepticism. We just think that promoting science and promoting science literacy is important in its own right, even if it doesn't promote skepticism directly. In fact, there is this strange thing in New South Wales where one of the most prominent teachers in the Science Teachers Association of New South Wales is a science teacher in a Baptist school, and he's a creationist. I interviewed him for the Skeptic Zone years ago, and when we got to that point, everything about science was great, but then at some point I said, look, you have in your lab, you have just wonderful science facilities. They have a whale jaw, so very large bone, a lower jaw of a I don't remember what whale it was.
Right.
I said, that is, if you don't see evolution in that, then you won't see evolution in anything. And basically he said, no, we believe that, God created creatures as they are, and just that's the way it is. So to the question of how he still teaches science, he basically said we teach what's on the curriculum. But we also tell the kids what we believe. Now, the thing is that there is a very good chance that his students will not endorse skepticism. Even though they know science, they know the scientific method, they do wonderful experiments, they win prizes all the time because they really do very well. They will not become skeptics. They are devout Christians. But promoting science is an important goal in its own right. We recently supported something that is a lot closer to skepticism, or actually I'll mention two causes. One is a study by University of Sydney around the way people respond to advertising around alternative medicine, or I prefer to call it alternatives to medicine. We gave a significant amount of money to that cause. The study is still ongoing. It will be probably a few years before we know the results, or at least a couple of years. But again, this is something that is very important to us. It is clearly of skeptical interest. Another one is there's a new website, a startup called MetaFact. MetaFact aims to engage experts in a fairly large number of broad scientific topics. Engage experts in answering questions where the answer is a yes or no question, and the idea is to get definitive answers on those questions by finding the best people who are best equipped, but then getting them to vote on the answers. So the people ask the question, then the staff of MetaFact phrase it as a yes/no question, and then those experts say what they think about this topic and provide additional input, which is the idea is to make it so that it's available for lay people. It's not supposed to be for experts only. This is again something that we worry about a lot. This is something the entire world now cares about. How do you know that something on the web is true or not true? And clearly is a skeptical cause. We've invested in that. But having said that, we have not done the analysis of whether it's going to be useful or not. We talked about it. We decided that it's something that's worthy of investment, and we go by to a certain extent without evidence, which is kind of ironic. But we are all volunteers, so it's difficult to do a lot of analysis work around those things.
Well, I certainly understand that. I mean, I don't know what I assume. Skeptoid Media is a smaller organization than Australian Skeptics, but pretty much have to make all the decisions the same way. It's like each year. The idea is to be producing a documentary film each year, but I think that's going to stretch to every 2 or 3 years just because they tend to take longer to make. But that's a significant investment of time. We have to go to donors to get the funds for it, and as you know, you can't go to the same donors too many times. So you can't keep going to the same group of people and say, "Hey, we need $250,000 for this." You've got to make sure that those projects are, worthwhile, and that they're going to have enough of an impact that the donors are going to want to come back a second time. And you've got to be really careful about what projects you can spend money on. And like you, we just don't have the data. The board at Skeptoid gives me a lot of leeway to decide what kinds of projects I want to do. Clearly that's the podcast always, because that's kind of the bread and butter. But then there's these various video series that we've tried. There's the larger documentary films, and there's other little miscellaneous projects here and there. And like you, I don't really just kind of have to go by. I hate to say I'm going by the seat of my pants, and I really hate to say that because our treasurer is sitting right here. But but that's the fact of the situation. It's hard to measure impact when you're doing this kind of skeptical work, and measuring impact and being able to provide meaningful impact statements to donors and grantors is, it's an important part of the business, and it's just impractical to be able to do, at least at this level.
Well, in our case, I would say that measuring would probably be impossible. It would take years to find out whether it has impact on skepticism in society. This is something that I wanted to actually talk to you. So, what have we done? So, one of the things we did a few years ago. Let me just open the website. Back in 2015, we realized that our goals were very old. They were written in the 80s, and they really didn't reflect what we do in real life. The day-to-day of the organization did not match what the goals were. And we spent first we had some email conversation around what the goals would be. Then we had a weekend workshop to decide what the goals would be. And then over a period of, I would say it was probably 7 or 8 months. So it was a very, very long conversation. We got to the point where we now have goals that, divided properly in corporate style, vision, mission, and aims, but we try to make it something that is meaningful and useful. But the thing is that our vision is a society that makes decisions based on evidence, reason, and critical thinking. Clearly,
outrageous.
But clearly, it's an aspiration. It is not something that we will ever get to fully, or definitely not to the extent that we would like to. But moving towards that goal, towards that vision is what's important. And then we have the mission, how the aims are the details of how it's going to be achieved. The thing is that all of these things, with the exception of maybe a couple of the aims, are really long term. So measuring impact is very difficult. We can't even measure it in terms of, you might be able to measure it in terms of the number of listeners or reach or things of that sort. We can't do that. So when we invest in this kind of in MetaFact or in this study by Senior University, we will not know. We can give up on the idea of evidence, because evidence will be hard to come by, even if we had the resources, which of course we don't. We have one employee, the rest of us are volunteers, and we just have to live with what we have and work towards these goals to the best of our abilities.
One of the things that we put out earlier this year is the Teacher's Toolkit, which is basically it's a little software platform. It's mobile friendly and everything, and it allows currently Skeptoid podcasts to be shared with a classroom, which provides the teachers a very easy way to put together a little curriculum. Currently, it's just Skeptoid Podcast, but we hope to open it up to much more other content. And for just that little thing, it's just a little software widget. We want to be able to say, we can say things like, X number of teachers used this in X number of classes and played this many episodes for this many students, because we get those metrics. It's students, so we don't collect any personally identifiable information, but we have the count. We know that 25 students in this classroom listens to these episodes. So that's nice, but was that a positive thing or a negative thing? We need to be able to say, did it keep this many kids off of drugs, or keep this many kids out of jail, or help them get better earning potential because they went and they got a degree in the sciences or something like that. And so since we didn't know how to calculate those, we started going out to the teachers themselves who were using the tool, and we're asking them, how do you measure the impact of education? And one thing we found is that that's a huge hole in education, too. Educators don't know. Universities don't know how they measure the impact of their classes. And that was a surprising thing to learn. And it presents a problem for us. It's like, how do we convince people that what we're doing is valuable?
Okay, well, I have the perfect answer for that. Exams. That will make the students love you so much.
give them all exams. Great.
Exams.
That's a great idea.
How skeptical are you?
Anyway, it's just one more adventure in trying to do this in more of a formalized way and not have it be just a hobby or a podcast or something. But let's see if we can actually make some impact in society. And you can't just do that by the seat of your pants. You've got to take it seriously and separate what's real work from what's a hobby.
Well, we are fortunate as an organization, first of all, that we have a really good team of people in the. I think we have a great committee of really committed, thoughtful, active people who are very dedicated to the cause, and that allows us to do a lot of things. We've also been fortunate over the years to have been the beneficiaries of several bequests that mean that, we're okay financially. Our needs, our internal needs are very modest, and that allows us to spend money on other causes. And if occasionally we make a bad choice, then we make a bad choice, and we're not going to go down because of it. We make sure of that. We make sure that we invest solidly and don't throw our money away. But definitely we don't have the evidence, as I said, to support our decisions.
Yeah. Do you guys still do the prize?
Sorry, I didn't hear. There was a bit of a drop in the...
Sorry, do you still do the prize? You were offering a prize for paranormal abilities.
Yes, we have a $100,000 prize, which is equivalent to Randy's $1 million prize, what used to be Randy's $1 million prize. Yeah. We've had some really strange claimants over the years. We have claimants all the time. They very rarely get to the point of testing because we demand of them that they first need to be able to articulate what it is that they can do in a way that is testable. Yep. And that is a almost insurmountable hurdle for the vast majority of them.
Yeah, their claim is always something really vague, like they can increase your consciousness with their energy field.
Yeah. It really is surprising how difficult it is for people to say, what do you do? And we guide them through it. We don't work against them, we work with them. So, we try to say, okay, well, what is it you can do? And they say something, I said, well, but how does it manifest itself in the real world? It just doesn't happen. Eventually when they, and then, maybe they make some statement about being able to move objects or something. And then we say, okay, with what kind of heavy objects, light objects, with what level, what percentage of success do you expect? All kinds of things like that. And it's just impossible to get it out of them, even with attempts, really solid attempts at helping them get there. It's just not working. The last one we had that I recall was a guy who said he had a female collaborator in New York who he communicated with spiritually, and he could communicate various messages. He suggested something really complex to begin with. We eventually distilled the protocol into something like he had to choose the word 12 pictures, I think, and he had to choose the number of the picture, and she had a sheet with the pictures as well and with the numbers as well, and he basically had to send her the numbers. And he could choose whether he sent her the numbers or the picture. That's my recollection. It was something along those lines, anyway. And we arranged with Michael Feldman from New York City Skeptics to stand in the corner of a street in downtown Manhattan on a cold afternoon, midwinter, in order to make the time differences work, we were met at a lawyer's office at 7 a.m. on that same day. With like everything, just try to make it all work. And the collaborator never showed up. And we believe now, we believe after the fact, based on the information that we have, is that she never existed. She's just in his own mind. So that's as close as we got to testing someone in recent years. There's all kinds of claims, technical claims. There's a lot of every few years we organize tests for water diviners. That's kind of a mass test usually. Richard's been involved in many of those, and we occasionally have somebody who invents a perpetual motion machine or something like that. But there's very few get to the point where it's an actual test. It's just, but it's a good thing to have. The reason it's there, the $100,000 prize, is to ask people, if you make the claim, okay, well, there's a $100,000 prize, and obviously to get them to be tested. And I have to say, one of the things that a lot of people don't get is that we really do want to test those people. If they have a testable claim, we really want to test them. We don't want them to fail necessarily. We think they'll fail, but we don't want them to fail. It's not that we're not doing this in order to trap them or ridicule them. After the fact, it's a different thing, because very often what we see is that obviously they fail. We know the fact that they fail. Sometimes they are ridiculous, that we ridicule them, although generally not in public. But we do report on their failures, and that's part of the deal. But when we get into a test, it's absolutely with a goal of finding out whether they can do what they want to, or what they claim to do.
That's really interesting. I remember that when Randy first started offering his prizes, long ago when it was $10,000 and these smaller numbers like this, the tests would often take place on some national television program, and it would get plenty of viewers and plenty of attention. And then by the end of the challenge, when it was up to $1 million, and they would have these very large, very rigid, formal tests that they had at the Amazing Meeting. You remember they did one pretty much each year. And they would get essentially no press at all. Do you guys get any luck getting any press interest when you do have a test?
No.
That's
we
surprising to me.
We have the Ben Spoon Award. An award that we give once a year. We have several positive awards. We have the Skeptic of the Year. We have the Thornett Award for the Promotion of Reason, named after Fred Thornett, an Australian skeptic. We have the Barry Williams Prize for Skeptical Journalism. So we have positive awards, but we also have the Ben Spoon Award, which is awarded to the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle. And what we found was that it's very rare that we get any traction unless we go after a really big name. And even then, it's fleeting. It's not, it's good fun internally, but it's not something that attracts much attention.
I'm always really surprised by that, because when I see, if you go to any website that's got the stupid little clickbait ads at the bottom, every one of those clickbait stories is less interesting than $1 million challenge to a psychic, or $100,000 to a psychic, or whatever it is. It would seem to me that this is something that reporters would be all over and would love to. I mean, it's exactly the kind of news that people love to report these days, and I really don't understand why it doesn't get more press.
I don't have an answer to that. We should ask Taboola how they do, what magic they're responsible for that makes, it's so patently, these stories are so patently ridiculous and manifestly untrue and concocted, and yet, people click them. I don't know, maybe we're not very good at clickbaiting. You wouldn't believe you wouldn't believe what this famous chef did for breakfast. What he did for breakfast. What the famous chef did for breakfast was stare at the sun for 15 minutes. That's Pete Evans. He's won a Ben Spoon Award.
That's right. I remember that. And he advocated getting your nutrition by staring at the sun. A great time.
On the other hand, he is against sunscreen. So I don't know.
So I guess he didn't rub sunscreen into his eyes before doing that then.
Probably not.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're talking about giving prizes to students?
Yeah. So we don't give prizes to students directly. We go through the Science Teachers Association, so one in New South Wales, one in Victoria, and that's it's a fairly hefty prize for students, several $1,000s in total. But we don't decide how it's allocated. We just give the money, but for that we actually one of us gets to speak on the evening, with all the parents and teachers and students there. It's good exposure for us, but as I said earlier, the important thing is we want to support science. It's something that supports science. A lot of these kids, the winners become candidates for the International Science Fair. It's important in its own right. It's not about promoting us. You asked earlier about things that we've done. So some of the things that we've done at the international reach, you interviewed Brit earlier, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I was at work and I couldn't watch it, unfortunately. But Brit and us, we worked together on a fundraising campaign. Did you get to talk about that at all?
We didn't talk about that, no.
Yeah. But I'm sure she mentioned the fact that she was sued for her troubles as a skeptical campaigner.
Well, I wanted to avoid that subject, so we were just talking about the naturopathy and the universities and how all of that works. But yeah, of course I was aware of her legal troubles and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, she was going to be silenced as a skeptical activist, and that was something we've had a bit of experience because of previous case with Dr. Ken Harvey, a local activist who has been. There was an attempt to silence him through a lawsuit here in Australia, and this was back in 2011, I think. And back then, the Australian public supported him. We organised a fundraising campaign, managed to cover his legal costs, and we organised the same for Brit, and that this time on an international level. And Brit.
I think we're buffering.
Yes.
Might have froze up here. Oh, there you are. Little bits of you coming through here. We're froze up here. Should we have him redo his camera? That hasn't worked tonight. Camera off and back on. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid Eran has been eaten by a robot, and we're hearing his cries of death coming through as brief bits of audio. Uh-oh, that sounded like we lost him.
Bring him right back. Hopefully going to bring him right back.
Trying to retrieve Eran.
We're approaching a half hour.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Like, that means we're totally disconnected, right? Okay.
We appear to have lost him.
Okay.
Oh, wait, here he is. He just connected.
Hi.
Hey.
don't know what happened, but
Looks like you got back in with your phone or something.
yeah.
Hey, that's worked more than once tonight. So okay.
I know I could see and hear you very well, but somehow it didn't go through. So what's the last? Where was I silenced?
Where were you silenced?
I was talking about Brit and the fact that and Dr. Harvey.
Yeah, so I mean, we mentioned that you guys had helped with a fundraising campaign for her.
Yeah.
I just in the couple minutes that we have left. I mean, that the mention of there's been a number of cases where there's been these widespread fundraisers to take care of the legal expenses of people doing things that were actionable under libel laws or slander laws or whatever these kind of claims would be. And I'm absolutely not speaking of Brit or of anyone in particular, but I do often see colleagues of ours writing things in articles that make me go, I would never have written that. I mean, if I have to make this kind of a charge against somebody, I'm not even going to touch it. I'm going to go write on a different subject instead. And sometimes I do see people doing things that I think they're pushing their own risk too far. And I mean, as you remember, this is why Randy left PsyCop, because PsyCop said, you got to stop writing about this guy. Which guy was that? What's his name? Uri Geller. Thank you, of course. And so
I can do his accent.
I'm sure you can. So I don't know. Do you guys worry too much about that? Or I mean, do you think that it's necessary to make those kinds of actions against people? If you're going to write something that can get you into legal trouble, should you have not done it, and should you do it another way?
Okay, so I have two answers to that. One is as a member of Australian Skeptics, we do take libel laws very seriously. We have two lawyers on our committee, and they advise us on libel law. We make sure that we are not easy targets for libel lawsuits. But the thing is that anybody can sue, so you can't completely avoid. If you're going to say things that some people perceive as negative, and perhaps even about them specifically, you might get sued. So you can't. The suggestion that you can avoid being sued while being an activist is that's not going to happen. But you can't avoid being sued. What you can do is reduce the risk. So we take it really seriously. We have every few years we have like a workshop, a few hours going over the main things that how to make sure that we're not sued. But an upshot of the lawsuit with Brit and the fundraising campaign was we thought we had to think about how to deal with any leftover funds should there be any, and there will be funds left over from the campaign. And one of the things we said we might do is start a Skeptics Legal Defense Fund. And that's something that I have been working on for the past few months with a number of collaborators. I won't mention their names because we haven't yet agreed on exactly how it's going to work, but there's a number of high-profile collaborators. And we're working on establishing something like a legal defense fund that would help skeptics that are in legal trouble because of their skeptical activism. And there's a few of them in train at any moment in time. So this is something that's happening a lot. But one of the first things we said is we cannot do what we did for Brit for everyone. We cannot say she will not, you got sued, you won't spend a cent. But so the focus, we could help in some ways, but covering the costs would be rare. But what could such a fund do? And we very quickly landed on the fact that the main thing that such a fund would do is provide resources. And the number one resource would be how not to get sued, what to do in order to avoid getting sued. And in fact, one of the things that we think will be, and it's still going to take many months before we have everything up and running, so there'll be many changes, but I think the way the ideas that we're converging on suggest that whether you have kind of complied with the basic ideas and suggestions that we've made will be part of the criteria for whether you're supported financially. And even then, financial support, basically we will encourage people to follow good legal advice how to not get sued.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons is because people are not careful. And we understand that people, we are all very passionate ourselves. We understand the passion that makes you want to scream into high heaven and swear very loudly and say negative things about people who clearly deserve to have negative things said about them.
Yeah.
But you've got to be careful. But, occasionally you will have the situation that Steve has encountered, Steve Novella encountered, where somebody sued him, something that was clearly, nonsense. But what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yes, anybody can sue.
It still sucks up years of your life and life savings and everything else.
It does, which is why one of the things that this fund or foundation will probably do is provide some seed funding for legal advice to, if somebody gets sued, to help them kind of understand where they are and decide what the next steps are. Sometimes they will need to take down whatever offending material they put up. Sometimes there will need to be settlements. There's all kinds of things that will have to be done. When you know you're right about someone, if you call somebody a fraud or a scammer, and you know that it's true, then it's difficult when you have to take it down. I suspect that might have to happen sometime.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time. I want to thank you very much for this conversation. Obviously, we're just starting to get into a very rich area where we could have talked for a whole hour at least. But thank you very much, Eran. It's always great to see you and always great to hear your thoughts. So
it's nice to see you, Brian, and happy birthday to you and to Skeptoid.
And happy December 29th upcoming to you, sir.
Yeah, okay.
All right. We'll see you later, man.